Warren Yates had been staring at spreadsheets for 3 months straight when his assistant suggested he actually leave the office for once. The 30-year-old CEO of Yates Manufacturing had built his company from the ground up, turning a struggling metal fabrication business into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that supplied custom parts to aerospace and automotive industries across the country. He had money, success, and absolutely no life outside of work. "There's a harvest festival in Millbrook this weekend," his assistant Sarah had said, sliding a colorful brochure across his desk. "It's about 2 hours from here. Fresh air, local food, maybe it'll give you some perspective." Warren had laughed at first, but the idea stuck with him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd done something that wasn't directly related to production schedules or contract negotiations. So on a crisp Saturday morning in October, he found himself driving his Range Rover down winding country roads, watching the landscape transform from industrial parks to rolling farmland painted in autumn colors. Millbrook was exactly the kind of place Warren had left behind years ago. Main Street was lined with brick buildings that looked like they hadn't changed since the 1950s, and hand-painted signs advertised everything from homemade pies to antique furniture. The Harvest Festival had transformed the town square into a bustling marketplace, with white tents stretching in neat rows and the smell of cider donuts drifting through the air. Warren parked on a side street and walked toward the festival, already feeling conspicuous in his designer jeans and leather jacket. Everyone here seemed to know everyone else, greeting neighbors and stopping to chat in a way that felt foreign to him now. He bought a cup of apple cider from a woman who insisted on telling him about her grandson's baseball achievements before she'd let him pay, and he wandered through the crowd with no particular destination in mind. That was when he saw her. She was standing behind a small wooden table loaded with glass jars that caught the afternoon sunlight, each one filled with what looked like jewels deep purple, bright red, gold and amber. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and she wore a simple green sweater that somehow made her hazel eyes look more vibrant. She was laughing at something an elderly customer had said, her whole face lighting up with genuine warmth. Warren found himself walking toward her table without consciously deciding to do so. "These are all homemade," she was saying to the elderly woman, carefully wrapping jars in brown paper. "The strawberry rhubarb is my grandmother's recipe. It's a little tart, but that's what makes it special." The customer paid and moved on, and suddenly those hazel eyes were looking directly at Warren. Up close, she was even prettier. There was flour or maybe powdered sugar on her cheek, and her smile was natural and unguarded. "Hi there," she said. "Looking for jam, or are you just browsing?" "I honestly don't know," Warren admitted. "I've never really thought much about jam before." She laughed, and the sound made something in his chest tighten. "Well, that's a shame. Good jam can change your whole morning. I'm Faye Mitchell, and I make all of these myself. Warren Yates." He extended his hand, and when she shook it, her palm was warm and her grip was firm. "So what makes your jam better than the stuff in stores?" Faye's eyes narrowed playfully. "Are you really asking me that question? Store-bought jam is fine if you like preservatives and corn syrup. This is actual fruit, actual sugar, actual love and time. Here." She unscrewed the lid of a small jar and produced a box of crackers from under the table. She spread a little of the deep red jam on a cracker and handed it to him. "Try the cherry vanilla. I just perfected the recipe this summer." Warren bit into it, and the flavor exploded across his tongue, sweet and tart and complex in a way he hadn't expected. "Okay, that's incredible. Told you." She looked triumphant. "Cherry vanilla, blackberry lavender, and peach bourbon are my specialty flavors." The traditional ones are great too, but I like experimenting. Blackberry lavender. Warren picked up one of the purple jars, examining it. That sounds like something from a fancy restaurant. It tastes like summer and fancy tea had a baby, Faye said. In a good way. I sell a lot of it to the bed and breakfast over on Elm Street. They put it out for their guests at breakfast. Warren found himself genuinely interested. How did you get into this? Making jam, I mean. Faye's expression softened. My grandmother taught me when I was little. She had this huge garden, and every summer we'd spend days putting up preserves for the winter. When she passed away 3 years ago, I inherited her house and all her recipes. I was working as a teacher's aide at the time, but I started making jam on weekends and selling it at the farmer's market. It kind of took off from there. So you do this full time now, as of 6 months ago, yeah. She looked both proud and slightly nervous admitting it. It's terrifying and amazing at the same time. I have a commercial kitchen set up in my basement, and I've got accounts with a few local shops and restaurants. It's not making me rich, but I love it. Warren bought 6 jars, including the cherry vanilla, even though he lived alone and had never been much of a breakfast person. Faye wrapped each one carefully, chatting easily about the festival and how this was always her busiest weekend of the year. She had a way of talking that made Warren feel completely at ease, like they'd known each other for years instead of minutes. "You're not from around here," she observed as she handed him the bag. "That obvious, small town. We notice new faces." Her smile was teasing but kind. "Plus, nobody from Millbrook looks that uncomfortable at the Harvest Festival," Warren laughed. "I run a manufacturing company about 2 hours north of here. Needed a break from the office. And you chose our little festival. Did you lose a bet or something?" "My assistant's idea. She thinks I need more balance in my life." "Smart assistant." Faye tilted her head, studying him. "Are you finding any balance so far?" "Actually, yeah. This is the most relaxed I've felt in months." Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than necessary. Warren felt something shift in the air between them, something electric and unexpected. Before he could figure out what to say next, a middle-aged man approached the table with questions about bulk orders for his restaurant, and Warren stepped aside to let them talk. He wandered through the rest of the festival, sampling food and watching demonstrations of traditional crafts, but his mind kept drifting back to Faye Mitchell and her jars of jewel-toned jam. There was something about her that had gotten under his skin, not just her looks, though she was beautiful, but the way she talked about her work with such genuine passion. It reminded Warren of why he'd started his own company in the first place, that feeling of building something meaningful with your own hands. When he circled back to her table an hour later, she was helping a family with young children pick out flavors. She caught his eye and grinned, giving him a little wave. Warren waved back and felt like a teenager with a crush. He made himself leave the festival and drive back to the city as the sun began to set, but the bag of jam sat on his passenger seat like a promise of something he couldn't quite name. On Monday morning, Warren opened the cherry vanilla jam and spread it on toast in his apartment kitchen. It tasted even better than he remembered. He found himself thinking about Faye while he ate, wondering what she was doing right now. Probably in her basement kitchen, stirring huge pots of fruit and sugar, her hair pulled back and that same warm smile on her face. "You seem distracted," Sarah said when he got to the office. "How was the festival?" "Good, really good actually." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Did something happen?" Warren tried to play it cool. "I bought some jam, met the woman who makes it. It was interesting, that's all." "Interesting enough to make you smile like that?" Warren hadn't realized he'd been smiling. "It was just nice to see someone doing work they love. Made me think about things." But as the week went on, Warren realized it was more than that. He couldn't stop thinking about Faye. He found himself wondering if she was single, if she'd felt that same spark of connection he had, if it would be completely crazy to drive back to Millbrook just to see her again. He'd never been the kind of guy who got hung up on someone after one conversation. His relationships had always been pragmatic, with women who understood that his business came first. But there was something different about Faye Mitchell. By Friday, he'd talked himself out of going back at least a dozen times. She probably wouldn't even remember him. He'd just be some random guy who bought jam and then showed up again like a stalker. Plus, he had work to do. There was always work to do. But Friday evening found him in his Range Rover anyway, heading back down those winding country roads as the setting sun painted the sky orange and pink. Millbrook looked different without the festival crowds. Main Street was quiet, with just a few people walking into the Italian restaurant on the corner. Warren had no idea where Faye lived, and he couldn't just drive around looking for her. That really would be stalker behavior. Then he remembered what she'd said about selling to local shops. He parked and started walking, checking the windows of the small stores that were still open. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. The general store on Main Street had a small display of jam jars near the register, each one labeled with Faye's homemade preserves in elegant script. "Can I help you?" asked the teenage girl behind the counter. "These jams," Warren said, pointing to the display. "Do you know how I could contact the woman who makes them?" The girl looked suspicious. "Why, I met her at the festival last weekend. I wanted to talk to her about her business." "Are you a cop or something?" "What? No, I'm just—" Warren pulled out his wallet and showed her his business card. "I'm just someone who really liked her jam and wanted to talk to her." The girl studied the card, then shrugged. "She's probably at home. She lives in the blue house out on Maple Road, about a mile past the Methodist church. Big front porch, lots of flowers. You can't miss it." Warren thanked her and got back in his car, his heart beating faster than it should have been. This was ridiculous. He was a successful CEO driving across 2 counties because of jam, but he kept driving anyway. The blue house was exactly as described, a charming Victorian with a wraparound porch and garden beds that even in October were full of asters and chrysanthemums. Warren could see lights on in the windows. He sat in his car for a full minute, gathering his courage before finally walking up to the front door and knocking. Faye answered, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. "Warren, what are you doing here?" He suddenly felt like an idiot. "I was in the area and thought I'd stop by. Is that weird?" "That's probably weird. I can go." But she was smiling. "It's definitely unexpected. How did you find me?" "The girl at the general store. I told her I wasn't a stalker, but now I'm not sure she believed me." "I'm not, by the way, a stalker." Faye laughed and some of Warren's nervousness eased. "I believe you. Come in. It's getting cold out there." The inside of her house was as charming as the outside, hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and an eclectic mix of vintage and modern furniture that somehow worked perfectly together. It smelled like cinnamon and something else Warren couldn't quite identify. "I was just making apple butter," Faye said, leading him through to the kitchen. "It has to cook for hours, so I'm basically just babysitting a pot. Do you want coffee or tea or something?" "Coffee would be great." While Faye made coffee, Warren looked around the kitchen. It was clearly the heart of the home, shelves full of cookbooks. A huge farmhouse table covered in notebooks and recipe cards, copper pots hanging from hooks on the wall. Through an open door, he could see stairs leading down to what must be the basement kitchen she'd mentioned. "So," Faye said, handing him a mug. "Not that I'm not happy to see you, but you drove 2 hours on a Friday night to visit a woman you met once at a festival. There has to be a story there. Warren wrapped his hands around the warm mug. The truth is, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you all week. And I know that sounds insane, but I figured I could either sit at home wondering what if, or I could drive down here and find out if you thought I was completely crazy. Faye's cheeks flushed pink. And what if I think you're completely crazy? Then I'll apologize for bothering you and drive home, but I'm really hoping you don't. She bit her lip, and Warren could see her weighing something in her mind. Finally, she said, I thought about you too. After you left, I kept hoping you'd come back before the festival ended. I almost asked if I could give you my number, but I didn't want to be weird about it. Relief flooded through Warren. So I'm not crazy. Oh, you're definitely a little crazy, but in a good way. She sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for him to join her. Tell me more about this manufacturing company of yours. They talked for hours. Warren told her about how he'd started Yates Manufacturing right out of college, taking over a failing business from a family friend, and building it into something successful through sheer determination and a lot of sleepless nights. Faye told him about growing up in Millbrook, leaving for college with plans to live in a big city, and then coming back after her grandmother died because she realized that home was where she wanted to be. Do you ever regret it? Warren asked. Choosing the small town life? Faye shook her head. Not even for a second. I know it probably seems boring to someone like you, but I love it here. I know my neighbors. I can walk to the farmer's market. My life feels meaningful in a way it never did when I was trying to fit into someone else's idea of success. It doesn't sound boring at all, Warren said quietly. It sounds kind of perfect, actually. The apple butter needed to be checked, and Faye led Warren down to her basement kitchen. It was impressive stainless steel counters, industrial-grade stove, shelves lined with empty jars waiting to be filled. Faye stirred the pot of dark, fragrant apple butter and nodded in satisfaction. Another hour, maybe. Do you want to stay for dinner? I was just going to make pasta, but there's plenty. Warren knew he should probably say no. He should go home and not get any more tangled up with this woman who lived 2 hours away and seemed to represent everything his life wasn't. But he found himself saying, I'd love to. They cooked together, Faye making pasta with homemade tomato sauce while Warren put together a salad under her direction. It felt domestic and comfortable in a way that Warren's expensive dates at upscale restaurants never had. They ate at the kitchen table, talking and laughing, and Warren realized he was happier than he'd been in years. I need to tell you something, Warren said as they were cleaning up. And I don't want it to change things between us, but I feel like I should be honest. Faye turned to look at him, concerned. Okay. My company, it's bigger than I made it sound. I've got about 200 employees and we do about $50 million in revenue a year. I'm not just a small business owner, I'm fairly wealthy. Faye's eyebrows went up. Define fairly wealthy. My net worth is somewhere around 30 million, depending on how the stock market's doing. She was quiet for a moment, processing this. Why are you telling me? Because I like you, and I don't want there to be secrets between us. And because I've dated women who were more interested in my money than in me, and I need to know that's not what this is. Faye set down the dish towel she'd been holding. Warren, I'm a jam maker in a town of 3,000 people. If I was interested in money, I'd have made very different life choices. I like you because you drove 2 hours to see me, and because you talk about your work the way I talk about mine, and because you make me laugh. The money is it's just a thing you have. It's not who you are. Warren felt something tight in his chest loosen. Good, that's good. But I do have a question. Anything. If you're this successful CEO, why are you single? And please don't tell me you're actually married or something, because that would really ruin the evening. Warren laughed. Not married. Never been married. I was engaged once, about 5 years ago, to a woman I met through work, but she wanted me to be someone I wasn't, more social, more interested in the scene, I guess. She didn't understand why I wanted to work so much. We broke up about 6 months before the wedding. That must have been hard. It was a relief, honestly. We weren't right for each other. Since then, I've dated here and there, but nothing serious. I work a lot. Most women don't want to compete with a business for attention. I get that, Faye said. I've been single for about 2 years. My last boyfriend couldn't understand why I wanted to quit my stable job to make jam. He thought it was a cute hobby, but he didn't take it seriously. We fought about it constantly until I finally realized I was never going to be with someone who didn't respect my choices. He was an idiot. Faye smiled. Turns out he was, but it took me a while to see it. It was nearly midnight when Warren finally forced himself to leave. They stood on Faye's front porch, neither of them quite ready to say goodbye. "Can I see you again?" Warren asked. "And not in another week. Soon." "I'd like that." "When?" "Tomorrow," Faye laughed. "You want to drive 2 hours again tomorrow?" "I want to spend more time with you. The drive is just details." She reached up and kissed his cheek, and Warren inhaled the scent of her vanilla and cinnamon and something uniquely Faye. "Come for lunch. I'll make something that's not pasta." Warren drove home feeling like he was floating. He knew this was crazy. He knew long-distance relationships were complicated and that he barely knew this woman. But he also knew that something significant had happened tonight. Something worth pursuing no matter how impractical it might be. He came back on Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, Faye took him to the local orchard where she bought most of her fruit, and they picked apples together in the crisp autumn air. The owner, an old man named Henry, clearly adored Faye and told Warren several stories about her that made her blush. On Sunday, they went for a long hike through the state park just outside town, talking about everything from their childhoods to their favorite books to their biggest fears. "I'm scared that my business will fail," Faye admitted as they sat on a boulder overlooking a valley painted in fall colors. "I've put everything I have into this, all my savings, all my time, all my energy. What if people stop buying jam? What if I'm not good enough?" Warren took her hand. "From what I've seen, you're more than good enough. But even if things got tough, you'd figure it out. You're smart and creative and determined. Those qualities don't just disappear." "What are you scared of?" she asked. Warren was quiet for a long moment. "I'm scared that I've built this whole life that looks successful from the outside but doesn't actually make me happy. And I'm scared that by the time I figure out what I really want, it'll be too late." Faye squeezed his hand. "It's not too late. You're 30. You have time." "I feel like I've wasted so much of it already, though. Working all the time, not having real relationships, not doing anything just for the joy of it." "Then stop wasting it. Start doing things differently." It sounded so simple when she said it. Warren leaned over and kissed her, soft and tentative at first, then deeper when she responded. Her lips were warm, and she tasted like the hot chocolate they'd had from the thermos in her backpack. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I really like you, Faye Mitchell." "I really like you too, Warren Yates." They spent the rest of the day together, and Warren didn't leave until late evening, dragging his feet the whole way back to his car. He had to work on Monday, had meetings and calls and decisions to make, but all he wanted to do was stay in Millbrook with Faye. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Warren would work brutal hours Monday through Thursday, clearing his schedule so he could spend Friday through Sunday in Millbrook. He started keeping clothes and toiletries at Faye's house. They cooked together, took long walks, helped each other with their work. Faye taught Warren how to make jam, and he proved to be surprisingly good at following recipes once he treated it like a chemistry experiment. Warren helped Faye set up a better bookkeeping system for her business and gave her advice on scaling production. "You could be huge," he told her one Saturday morning as they worked in her basement kitchen, processing bushels of cranberries. "Your product is incredible. With the right distribution strategy, you could be in stores across the region." Faye looked uncertain. "I don't know if I want to be huge. I like that what I do is personal. I like knowing the people who sell my jam, being able to control quality on every batch." "You could still do that. You'd just be reaching more people." "Maybe. I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet." Warren dropped the subject, but he couldn't help thinking about the potential. He understood now why she'd given up teaching to do this. There was something almost meditative about the process of making jam. The way you had to pay attention to every detail. The satisfaction of seeing rows of finished jars cooling on the counter. It was Faye's best friend Rachel who finally voiced what everyone in Millbrook was apparently thinking. Warren met her at the local bar one Friday night when Faye had insisted on introducing him to her friends. Rachel was a nurse at the county hospital, sharp-eyed and protective. "So you're the big city CEO we've been hearing about," Rachel said, looking Warren up and down appraisingly. "I guess I am." "And you drive 2 hours every weekend to see Faye." "I do." "Why?" Warren met her gaze steadily. "Because I'm falling in love with her." Rachel's expression softened slightly. "Good answer. But if you hurt her, I know where you live now and I have access to medical supplies that could make your life very uncomfortable." "Understood." Later, when Warren told Faye what he'd said to Rachel, she stopped walking and turned to face him. They were strolling through town after leaving the bar, and the streetlights cast her face in soft shadows. "Did you mean it?" she asked quietly. "About falling in love with you?" "Yes, completely." Faye's eyes were bright. "I'm falling in love with you too. It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." "Tell me about it. I've never felt like this before." "Me neither." They kissed under the streetlight, and Warren felt like his entire world had narrowed down to this moment, this woman, this feeling of absolute rightness. But as November turned into December, the reality of their situation started to press down on them. Warren was spending every weekend driving back and forth, which meant he was basically living out of a suitcase and never getting a real break. His work was starting to suffer from the lack of focus, and his board of directors was beginning to ask questions about his frequent absences. "You need to figure out what you want," his CFO told him during a tense meeting. "You can't run a company this size at half attention. Either commit to being here, or commit to making a change." Warren knew he was right, but he didn't know what the answer was. He couldn't ask Faye to give up everything she'd built in Millbrook to move to the city. Her business was rooted in local relationships and her grandmother's legacy. But he also couldn't see how to keep doing what they were doing indefinitely. "What if I moved to Millbrook?" he asked Faye one snowy December evening as they sat by her fireplace. She looked shocked. "Warren, your whole life is in the city. Your company, your home, everything." "My company can run with good managers. I could drive in a few days a week for important meetings and handle the rest remotely. People do it all the time now. But would you be happy here? This town is nothing like what you're used to." Warren pulled her closer. "I'm happiest when I'm with you. Everything else is just logistics." Faye was quiet for a long time. "I don't want you to resent me. I don't want you to give up your life and then wake up one day and realize you made a huge mistake. The mistake would be letting you go because I'm too stubborn to adapt." They talked late into the night, weighing options and possibilities. Warren's mind was already working through the practical aspects. He could promote his VP of operations to Chief Operating Officer, set up a home office with video conferencing capabilities, keep an apartment in the city for when he needed to be there for extended periods. The more he thought about it, the more sense it made. "Are you absolutely sure?" Faye asked as they were falling asleep, her head on his chest. "I've never been more sure of anything." The transition took longer than Warren expected. He spent January reorganizing his company structure, training his new COO, and dealing with the logistics of moving his life. His board thought he was crazy until they saw that his plan actually made sense. With modern technology, he could run strategy and high-level decisions from anywhere. He didn't need to be in the office every day for the company to function. He found a house in Millbrook that needed renovation, a craftsman bungalow about a mile from Faye's place with good bones and enough land for a garden. Faye helped him pick out furniture and paint colors, and Warren discovered he enjoyed the process of making a home instead of just having a place to sleep between work sessions. "This color," Faye said, holding up a paint swatch in soft sage green. "For the living room. It'll look good with the wood trim." Warren trusted her completely. His city apartment had been decorated by a professional in sleek grays and blacks. This house was going to be different, warm and lived in and real. By February, Warren was settled into his new routine. He drove to the city on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for in-person meetings, worked from his home office the rest of the week, and spent his evenings and weekends with Faye. He joined the Rotary Club, started playing basketball at the community center, and became a regular at the hardware store where the old-timers gathered every morning for coffee. "You're actually doing it," Faye said one evening as they made dinner together in his new kitchen. "You're really becoming part of this place. Did you doubt me? Maybe a little. I thought you'd miss the city, miss the fast pace." Warren wrapped his arms around her from behind as she stirred sauce on the stove. "I don't miss it at all. This is the life I want, right here." In March, Faye got a call from a regional grocery chain interested in carrying her preserves. It was the kind of opportunity that could transform her business, but it would require significantly scaling up production and possibly hiring help. "I don't know if I can do it," she told Warren, looking overwhelmed as she stared at the proposal they'd sent. "This would mean making 10 times what I currently produce. I'd need more equipment, maybe a bigger space, definitely employees. It's everything I said I didn't want." "What do you want?" Warren asked. "Not what you think you should want, but what you actually want," Faye thought about it. "I want to share what I make with more people. I want my business to grow, but I don't want to lose the quality or the personal touch that makes it special. Then we figure out how to do both." "You don't have to do this alone." They spent the next week creating a plan. Warren helped Faye crunch numbers and develop a realistic production schedule. They found a commercial kitchen space in the next town over that was available for rent, bigger than her basement setup, but small enough that she could still oversee everything personally. Faye put out word that she was hiring, and by April she had 3 part-time employees who she trained meticulously in her methods. Warren watched her blossom with the challenge. She was nervous but excited, bringing the same careful attention to scaling her business that she brought to perfecting her recipes. He helped where he could, but this was her dream, and he was determined to support it without taking over. "I couldn't do this without you," she told him one night after a particularly long day of training her new employees. "Yes, you could, but I'm glad you don't have to." By May, Faye's preserves were on shelves in grocery stores across 3 counties, and her business was thriving. She was exhausted but glowing with satisfaction. Warren's company was also doing well. The new structure he'd implemented was actually running more efficiently than the old one, and his quality of life had improved dramatically. On a warm evening in late May, Warren took Faye to the orchard where they'd picked apples that first autumn. The trees were covered in white blossoms, and the air smelled like spring and new beginnings. They walked through the rows of trees holding hands, comfortable in the silence. "I have something to ask you," Warren said when they reached a clearing with a view of the rolling hills beyond. Faye turned to him, and her breath caught when she saw him pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I know we've only known each other for 8 months," Warren said, "but they've been the best 8 months of my life. You've made me see what's really important. You've made me want to be a better person. You've given me a reason to build a life that's about more than just work and success." He opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "Faye Mitchell, will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Faye's face. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Warren slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed as the sun set over the orchard, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. They were married in September, exactly 1 year after they'd first met at the Harvest Festival. The wedding was small and perfect, held in Faye's grandmother's garden, surrounded by friends and family and flowers. Warren's parents flew in from Florida, looking slightly bewildered but happy. His mother pulled him aside before the ceremony. "I've never seen you like this," she said. "So relaxed and genuinely happy. She's good for you." "She's everything," Warren replied simply. Faye wore a simple white dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. She'd made jam as wedding favors for all their guests, a special batch of strawberry champagne that she'd been perfecting for weeks. When Warren saw her walking toward him through the garden, he felt his throat tighten with emotion. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. They wrote their own vows. Faye promised to support Warren's dreams while keeping him grounded. Warren promised to be her partner in all things, to lift her up when she doubted herself, and to always remember that love was more important than work. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden when they finished. The reception was held in the backyard, with long tables covered in white linens and jars of Faye's preserves serving as centerpieces. They danced under string lights as a local bluegrass band played, surrounded by everyone they loved. Warren's business associates mixed with Millbrook locals, and somehow it all worked perfectly. "Thank you," Faye whispered as they swayed together during their first dance. "For what?" "For being brave enough to come back that second time. For being willing to change your whole life. For choosing me." Warren pulled her closer. "Best decision I ever made." They honeymooned in Vermont, staying at a small bed and breakfast and spending their days hiking through mountains and their evenings planning their future. They talked about having kids eventually, maybe 2 or 3. They talked about growing both their businesses while keeping their priorities straight. They talked about the life they wanted to build together in Millbrook, roots growing deep in good soil. When they returned home, married life settled around them like a comfortable blanket. Warren's house became their house, filled with Faye's touches, herbs growing in the kitchen window, colorful quilts on the furniture, photos of their wedding on the walls. They fell into easy routines: morning coffee on the porch, walks through town after dinner, quiet evenings reading or talking or simply being together. Warren's business continued to thrive under the new management structure. He still worked hard, but he also knew when to close his laptop and focus on what mattered. Faye's preserve business grew steadily, and by the following spring she was in talks with a distributor who could get her products into stores across the entire Northeast. "It's scary," she admitted to Warren one evening as they reviewed the proposal. "What if it's too much, too fast? Then we scale back. But I think you're ready for this. You've built something amazing and more people deserve to experience it." Faye signed the deal, and within months her jams were appearing in specialty stores from Maine to Virginia. She hired more employees, expanded her production facility, and somehow maintained the quality and personal touch that had made her preserves special in the first place. Warren watched with pride as his wife became a successful entrepreneur, featured in food magazines and local business publications. For their first anniversary, Warren surprised Faye with a fully renovated commercial kitchen built onto their house, a space that was entirely hers for recipe development and small batch experimentation. She cried when she saw it, running her hands over the professional-grade equipment and custom shelving. "I can't believe you did this," she kept saying. "You've given me so much. This is just a small way of saying thank you." In the kitchen that Warren had built for her, Faye continued to create new and wonderful flavors. She'd spend hours experimenting, and Warren would serve as her taste tester, giving her honest feedback and encouragement. Some of her experiments became new products. Others, they just enjoyed themselves, gifts from her creativity that didn't need to be anything more than delicious. 2 years after their wedding, Faye got pregnant. They'd been trying for about 6 months, and when she saw the positive test, she ran to Warren's office where he was on a conference call. He took one look at her face, immediately ended the call, and swept her into his arms. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." Warren spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. That evening, they sat on their porch swing watching the sunset and talking about nursery colors and baby names and all the ways their lives were about to change again. Pregnancy suited Faye. She glowed with health and happiness, her belly growing round as the seasons changed. Warren couldn't keep his hands off her, constantly touching her stomach and talking to their baby. He went to every doctor's appointment, read every baby book, and slowly transformed their guest room into a nursery painted in soft yellows and greens. Their daughter was born on a snowy January morning, arriving 3 weeks early, but perfectly healthy. They named her Yates, after both her grandmothers. She had Faye's hazel eyes and Warren's dark hair, and both of them fell completely in love the moment they saw her. Warren had thought he understood what love meant when he married Faye, but holding his daughter for the first time showed him new depths of feeling he hadn't known existed. He would protect this tiny person with everything he had. He would build a world where she felt safe and loved and free to become whoever she wanted to be. Faye took 3 months off from the business after Rose was born, and Warren cut back his hours even further to help with the baby. Those early months were exhausting, and beautiful sleepless nights, and tiny fingers, and the sweet smell of their daughter's head. They worked as a team, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating every milestone. When Faye was ready to return to work, they hired a nanny who could help part-time while they juggled their businesses and parenthood. Warren set up a playpen in his home office so Rose could be near him while he worked. Faye brought Rose to the production facility sometimes, letting her employees coo over the baby during breaks. "This is the life I dreamed of," Faye told Warren one evening as they sat together on the couch, Rose sleeping in Warren's arms. "Family, work I love, a partner who truly shares everything with me. I didn't know it could actually be real. It's real because we made it real. We chose each other and built this together." By the time Rose was 2, Faye was pregnant again. Their son, James Warren Yates, arrived in early autumn, right as the leaves were turning colors. He was calmer than Rose had been, content to watch the world with serious blue eyes that had come from somewhere back in Warren's family line. With 2 children, Warren and Faye's life got busier but also fuller. Rose was a whirlwind of energy, always asking questions and getting into everything. James was more thoughtful, happy to sit and play with blocks for hours. They were different but both perfect, and Warren marveled daily at the fact that he and Faye had created these incredible little humans. Faye's business had to be carefully balanced with motherhood, but she managed it with the same grace she brought to everything. She promoted one of her first employees to production manager, someone she trusted completely to maintain quality when she couldn't be there. She worked during school hours and nap times, and she never missed a moment of her children's lives that mattered. Warren's company continued to be successful, but he'd learned to measure success differently. Yes, revenue and growth mattered, but not as much as being there for Rose's first day of school or James's first steps. He'd built a life that had room for all of it: work and family and love and community. 5 years after their wedding, the town of Millbrook threw a celebration when Faye's Preserves won a National Food Award. The whole town turned out, proud of their local success story. Warren stood in the crowd with Rose on his shoulders and James in his arms, watching his wife give a speech about following your dreams and staying true to your values. "That's my mama," Rose announced proudly to anyone who would listen. After the ceremony, as the sun set over the town square and their children ran around with their friends, Warren pulled Faye close. "You remember that first day we met, when I bought 6 jars of jam from a pretty woman at the Harvest Festival?" Faye smiled up at him. "I remember thinking you looked lost, like you didn't quite belong anywhere. I was lost, and then I found you. We found each other." They kissed while their children played nearby, surrounded by the community that had embraced Warren as one of their own. The young CEO, who had visited a small town looking for something he couldn't name, had found everything he needed. The woman who sold jam had given him not just a reason to return, but a reason to stay, to build, to love, and to finally understand what home really meant. As autumn painted Millbrook in golds and reds once again, Warren thought about the journey that had brought him here. He'd given up a lifestyle that looked impressive from the outside but left him empty inside. In return, he'd gained a life rich with meaning: a wife he adored, children who filled every day with joy, work that still challenged him but no longer consumed him, and a community that had become his family. Sometimes on quiet evenings, after Rose and James were asleep, Warren and Faye would sit on their porch with glasses of wine and jars of whatever new flavor she was testing. They'd talk about their day, their plans, their dreams for their children. Faye would rest her head on Warren's shoulder, and he'd think about how a simple decision to visit a harvest festival had changed everything. "I love you," he'd say, because the words never got old and the feeling never faded. "I love you too," Faye would answer, her hand finding his in the darkness. And in those moments, surrounded by the life they'd built together, Warren knew that every choice, every risk, every change had been worth it. He'd found what he was looking for that October day when he wandered into a small town and met a woman selling jam. He'd found his reason to return, his reason to stay, and his reason to believe that love, when you're brave enough to choose it, can transform everything. Their story wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about the quiet decision to choose each other every day, to build a life based on shared values and genuine partnership, to create something beautiful in the space between ambition and contentment. It was about finding someone who made you want to be better while loving you exactly as you were. Years later, when Rose and James were older and asked about how their parents met, Warren and Faye would smile at each other and tell the story. The young CEO visiting a small town. The woman with her table full of jam jars. The connection that sparked between them and grew into something neither had expected but both had needed. "Your father tried my cherry vanilla jam and he was hooked," Faye would say, her eyes twinkling. "Your mother gave me a reason to come back," Warren would add, "and then a reason to stay forever." The children would groan at the mushiness of it all, but secretly they loved the story. They loved knowing that their parents had chosen each other, had built this life with intention and care, had created a family rooted in love and respect and genuine partnership. On their 10th anniversary, Warren and Faye renewed their vows in the same garden where they'd been married. Rose and James stood beside them as their parents promised once again to love and honor each other, to be partners in all things, to face whatever came together. Their friends and family gathered to celebrate a decade of marriage that had been tested and had emerged stronger. That night, after the celebration wound down and the children were asleep at their grandparents' house, Warren and Faye sat on their porch swing in the darkness. Stars stretched overhead and the night was peaceful and warm. 10 years, Faye said softly. Can you believe it? Best 10 years of my life, and I'm looking forward to the next 50, Faye laughed. 50 years, that's ambitious. I plan on sticking around for a very long time. You're not getting rid of me that easily. Good, because I plan on keeping you forever. They sat in comfortable silence, swaying gently on the swing. From inside the house, Warren could hear the old grandfather clock that had been Faye's grandmother's chiming the hour. The garden around them smelled like jasmine and summer roses. Everything was exactly as it should be. Warren thought about the person he'd been before meeting Faye, driven, successful, but fundamentally lonely. He'd measured his worth in quarterly reports and profit margins, never understanding that the most important things couldn't be quantified. Faye had taught him that lesson without ever trying to teach it. She'd simply shown him, through her own example, what it meant to live a life aligned with your values. And in learning that lesson, Warren had found not just love but purpose. His business mattered, but it was no longer the only thing that mattered. He was a husband, a father, a member of a community, a man who knew the difference between a life that looked good and a life that felt good. Thank you, he said suddenly. For what? For seeing something in me that day at the festival, for giving me a chance, for building this life with me. Faye turned to look at him, her face soft in the starlight. You gave yourself a chance by being brave enough to come back. Everything else just followed from that. We make a good team. The best team. They kissed, slow and sweet, the kiss of two people who knew each other completely and loved each other deeply. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Inside the house, in frames on the wall and in albums on the shelves, were photos that told their story. Warren at the Harvest Festival, grinning as he held up a jar of jam. Their first Christmas together, decorating a tree in his new house. Their wedding day surrounded by flowers and love. Rose as a newborn, tiny and perfect, James taking his first steps. Birthday parties and holidays and ordinary moments that somehow felt extraordinary because they were living them together. This was the life Warren had been searching for without knowing it. Not a life of constant striving and achievement, but a life of connection and meaning and joy. A life where success was measured in the laughter of his children and the warmth of his wife's hand in his. A life that had begun with a simple jar of jam and a woman who made him want to be better. As they sat on the porch watching the stars, Warren squeezed Faye's hand. She squeezed back, a silent conversation that said everything that needed to be said. They were home. They were together. They were exactly where they were meant to be. And somewhere in the basement kitchen, rows of jam jars waited to be filled, jewel-toned and beautiful, just like the life Warren and Faye had created together, one careful, loving choice at a time.